open-minded and spiritual, I would say, but I don't count myself as a follower of a particular religion. I was more driven by science and evidence in terms of how the world is working.
Meet David Amos, the managing director of PlusZero Limited, who has built multiple high-performance teams, led innovative change projects. With his involvement in the green hydrogen and clean power solutions, Amos combines deep technical insight with strategic vision, making him a highly sought-after leader in PlusZero Limited.
You as an innovative person will know us, understand intuitively and practically will be the fact that when anything is new, people are definitely going to be skeptical about it. The adoption rate is going to be very low. So how are you educating people to get them to be open to using this technology right now?
I guess our approach has been to take a technology
If somebody is listening to us now, I want you to make a case for hydrogen, please.
Well, hydrogen is really interesting because it allows the production of energy in an area that can then be used in an area.
Thank you for coming, and for those who do not know you, I would like for you to introduce yourself and what you do, of course.
Okay, well, thank you, Kaudu, for inviting me. So I'm David Amos, the founder and managing director of a company called PlusZero, and we are focused in the clean energy sector, producing hydrogen and using hydrogen to support the decarbonisation.
Awesome. I usually like to start from the beginning. Who is David Amos? I would like to know his background. How did you grow up?
Okay, so I grew up in the borders of Scotland, in a rural farming area in and around a small town called Kelso. And then I went to university in Edinburgh. That's where both my parents were from, and studied in Edinburgh. And then have spent most of my life working in and around Edinburgh, in a whole range of areas, but quite a lot of my career, which has been a little bit of a varied trajectory, but a lot of that has been in the public sector, working in local government, and had a spell in central government, but also between that had spells in the private sector, running my own business, and then latterly running some quite large multi-stakeholder projects with public sector funded projects involving governments, local governments, universities, private sector. And it was the last of those projects that I run, something called the Islands Growth Deal, that got me very interested and fired up about the opportunity that hydrogen offers to help address what's probably one of our most pressing problems at the moment, which is global warming.
Impressive. So I think I would still like to know a little bit more about your growing up years. Was there anything specific in your growing up here that informed what you are currently doing now as a business owner?
It's an interesting question. I was brought up in a strongly Christian household. My parents were evangelicals, so I had always been surrounded by quite a strong Christian ethos, and so trying to do the right thing by people, by community, but was, I guess, part of what I was exposed to from an early day. So one of the reasons I set PlusZero up was to try and do something about climate change, which I think is going to already is having a massive impact, and a negative impact on so many people around the world. So I wanted to feel that I was actually doing something that might have a positive impact on that. So I guess you could potentially connect that back to the way I was kind of brought up, and that view that you're not here just to do right by yourself, but you're here to do the right thing for your family, for your community, and I guess the world more generally. So.
Impressive. Are you still a religious person?
No. It ultimately never talked to me. So I'm not religious in terms of following a standard religion. I would say I'm open-minded and spiritual, I would say, but I don't count myself as a follower of a particular religion.
Is there, well, this is not a religious thing, but I'm just personally curious. Is there a reason for that?
Well, ultimately, it just didn't talk to me. I struggle to reconcile what is written in religious books like the Bible with the reality of science and the world that I see. I was more driven by science and evidence in terms of how the world works, and I felt there was a big disconnect between what was taught in religions and what I thought the reality of the world was.
That's okay. So let's talk about what you are currently doing with PlusZero right now. How did you decide? How did you form the decision to go into that space?
So I'd had the experience of running businesses before. When I graduated, I ended up helping my older brother, run his building business for a while, and that gave me my first taste of what it was like to be in business. And despite that business not being successful, it did spark an interest in me in running a business. And then about 10 years later than that, I set up my first business, which I ran for a few years, and again, ultimately it wasn't financially successful, so I moved on. But I'd always had an interest in going back to running a business of my own, but really hadn't come up with another idea or something that really I felt very strongly about until I was program director for something called the Islands Growth Deal, and in Scotland the growth deals are investments that UK and Scottish government jointly make into local authority areas in Scotland. They started off with city growth deals, so Glasgow City Region got the first growth deal, £1 billion from both governments. Then the other city regions all got their growth deals, and then eventually the opportunity to bid for a growth deal was opened up to all the rural parts of Scotland. So I led the development of the Islands Growth Deal, which was the growth deal for Orkney, Shetland and the Western Isles. And one of the things that we looked at in that deal was what could the islands do with all the abundant renewable energy that was going to be generated on the islands and around the islands from onshore and offshore wind and eventually potentially wave and tidal energy, and rather than just export that to the mainland where it doesn't really bring much benefit for island communities, what could you do with all of that renewable energy? And one of the things that came up was you can produce green hydrogen. So that's where you take electricity and put it into a machine called an electrolyzer, and that splits water into hydrogen and oxygen. And we identified that could potentially create a whole new clean energy sector and industry for the islands that could bring jobs, economic growth, and also provide clean energy to decarbonise the island's own energy system. So it was that was my first exposure to hydrogen. I convinced myself that it had a role to play in addressing climate change. I personally wanted to do more, to do something about addressing climate change, and it just all clicked. I thought, okay, well, here is an opportunity to get into a business that I think can make a difference and could be successful, that excites me. And so when we signed the heads of terms with both governments for the Islands Growth Deal, which was a 100 million investment from both governments, I stepped back from that role and set up PlusZero to try and move the hydrogen sector forward a bit more quickly and more directly through a business.
Wow. So what have you seen to be the trajectory of growth in this sector as of now?
So it's been very boom and bust is probably not the right word, but it's been slow and has been slower to develop than some had originally thought. So there was quite a bit of hype around hydrogen 3-4 years ago. Quite a lot of big announcements about major investments in producing hydrogen around the world, and probably not based on a very strong understanding of where the market was going, because there's no point in producing hydrogen if you don't have customers that want to use it. So I think quite a lot of that was probably unrealistic. So we've seen quite a number of announcements about some of the bigger projects, the higher profile projects that have subsequently been cancelled. So I know that has meant that quite a lot of the bigger companies and the investment sort of houses have pulled back a bit from hydrogen. But where you've taken a more pragmatic approach, and that's very much the approach we've taken in PlusZero, to try and match critically get customers that want to use hydrogen and are committed to trying to decarbonise their own business. So trying to match that use case and demand for hydrogen with the hydrogen that you then produce, so that you get that balance between supply and demand. Where and we're not the only one doing that, but where that's been done, there is steady growth sort of happening in the market now. So we work very closely with the construction sector, and some of the major UK construction companies have been investing a lot of time and effort to test hydrogen technology, go through the learning curve themselves about how hydrogen can support their decarbonisation plans, and thankfully they're also very keen to work with small companies that are and help them sort of grow with them. So the hype hasn't been realised that there was around hydrogen a few years ago, and I think some of the speculative money has disappeared, but there is a sort of steady growth trajectory, I think. So eventually hydrogen will play a role in decarbonising our energy system. It's not going to do everything, but it does have a role to play in it. So it might take a bit longer to get there than people thought a few years ago, but we'll definitely get there.
Well, of course, hydrogen has a role to play in decarbonization of the whole planet as a whole, and like most technology, there will usually be the hype of it before the real thing. It's not as if the real thing is not there, but it is just hyped. Just if you remember the .com bubble, yeah. It wasn't as if technology is not going to be what it is today, but as of that time, early adopters had unrealistic expectation. Yeah. So how are you managing, because you are also an early adopter of this technology, because you said you've convinced yourself to believe in this, which is something that is not usual. It's not something that is, it's a new face. Have you always been somebody that's always gone to the edge before?
Yeah, so I guess you could say I've always been somebody that liked to make things, like to take things apart, put them back together again. So I'm very practical in terms of, I can do lots of things with my hands and tools and everything. So I've always been interested in making things and making things happen, and I guess trying to find solutions to issues. A lot of the roles that I've done in my career have been about trying to make changes in organisations, in some cases multiple organisations, and trying to bring groups of people along with, to get behind those changes. So I guess all of that sort of falls into place with what we're trying to do, with PlusZero and with the hydrogen sector. We're trying to find solutions to, the requirement to replace our use of fossil fuels. And if you're somebody like me that really likes to try and find, better and different ways of doing things, then that's a really exciting challenge. But equally, I'm not unrealistic about how difficult some of these things can do, because I think quite a lot of the companies that moved into hydrogen in the early stages and came up with big plans for building plants and things didn't quite understand how challenging it was going to be. So there's been a bit of a fallout from that, as like the dot-com boom, I guess, as well, of companies that got in quickly thinking that there was lots of money to be made quickly, and then realised actually this is going to be a lot harder than we thought.
It's going to be a long way. It's not as if it is not there, but it's going to be a long way before the adoption. So and one of the things that you as an innovative person will know as understand intuitively and practically will be the fact that when anything is new, people are definitely going to be skeptical about it. The adoption rate is going to be very low, and people will. So how are you educating people to get them to be open to using this technology right now?
So I guess our approach has been to take a technology that everybody is very familiar with. So much of what we've done to date has been focusing on showing companies and organisations that use diesel generators for temporary power. So where you need electrical power, you don't have a connection to the grid, you generally will use a diesel generator to provide that power. So music festivals and events and construction sites, whole diesel generators are used for huge range of applications around the world. It's a massive industry in its own right. We reckon $20-30 billion just on the equipment alone on an annual basis, and you could probably multiply that by 10 by the amount of diesel fuel that's used to fuel the generators. So that's a technology that lots of people use and are familiar with. So we've said you can replace that diesel generator with a hydrogen fueled generator. It looks pretty much like the diesel generator that you've been working with. It just uses a different fuel, so it's using a compressed gas fuel rather than diesel. So it's made a sort of easier transition. The big change for them isn't the generator, because as I say, it looks like the generators they've been working with. The change is they're now having to use a compressed gas as the fuel rather than diesel, and which brings safety and related issues. But we put a sort of wraparound package, so we made it as easy as possible for the customer to adopt it. So we supply everything. We can provide the safety sort of assessment work for them. We can show them how it can be, how they can use that equipment very easily. We supply the hydrogen and all of the equipment. So try to make it as easy as possible for people to make that change. As I say, but the technology that we started on was something that everybody was familiar with. So we were not trying to completely change, make them do something that they'd never done before. So yes, that's probably how we've done it. Initially, we had to, in effect, pay for that, because we managed to persuade Scottish Government to give us a grant to help demonstrate that technology in Scotland. So we worked with Edinburgh International Festivals, and our very first hydrogen-powered event was a music performance by Scottish composer called Anna Meredith at the Edinburgh International Festival in 2021, and Scottish Government funded that, or we were able to deliver that using a grant that the Scottish Government had provided us. So that meant that the customer, Edinburgh International Festival, didn't have to pay for it, which obviously helps if you're getting something for free. And then, as I say, we did that complete wraparound package for them. So, you try and make it as easy as possible for people to sort of test out the new technology that you're offering, and then hopefully they say, okay, this is not as hard as we thought it was, and they will want to do it more.
Impressive. So the last question I asked was about because for somebody else who is watching it here, maybe working on a new technology, and the framework, the blueprints that you've given us right now start from what they already know. Don't try to change everything. People are already using diesel generator, so we say instead of using diesel to fuel this, we are going to show you how to use this because it is cleaner. Probably find more ways to communicate that to would-be user, because one of the problems that people face, anybody who is trying to bring in a new technology will be the status quo. What we are using already works. Why should we change? You're talking about hydrogen. Do I need to buy another generator? Do I need to? All of those things, and plus the fact that we as human, we like our comfort zone. If we've been doing it so far and it's been working, why change it? Yeah. What's the hassle for? So, which will now then bring me to the next couple of questions in regards to you as a person. How are you building? So, how did you, when you convinced yourself, what were the steps you take? How did you find funding for this idea? Let's talk about funding, because that's one of the major. He said 80% of the businesses that start in the first 1 to 2 years, they shut down because they run out of money. How did you fund this?
And that continues to be a challenge in the industry that we are working in, because we need to buy or build equipment, and we need to build plant to produce hydrogen. So it's quite a high capital cost business. So it wasn't something that we could have done without bringing in some funding. So how did I approach that at the start? It was through a sort of combination. One is I was able to persuade some partners to give me the equipment to get going for free.
Let's dig into that, because I did as you mentioned that now, I remembered, was it Bill Gates or Steve Jobs who wanted to build his first computer and called up this big technology company. He looked into the phone book, looked for the name, and called them that I need this, and they gave it to him, and that's why we have Steve Jobs of today. So please, can you talk a little bit more about that?
So one of the things I learned over the various jobs I've done is that if you want somebody or an organization to change or do something that you want them to do, there needs to be a win in there for them, and so you need to understand what are the wins that the people that you're working with want, and are you in a position to offer them any of those wins. So in relation to getting this equipment for free, this is still very early days in the hydrogen sector. Very, very few people had actually put any hydrogen equipment out there, or it wasn't being used for anything. So I went to a company that had developed a hydrogen generator, but it had never been used in a real life situation. So they tested it and they demonstrated, but no, they hadn't actually got it out into a real life deployment. So I went to them and said, look, Edinburgh International Festival, the largest cultural event in the world, has said they would be interested in having some of their events powered by hydrogen at this year's Edinburgh Festival. We'd like to use your generator for that, so that you're going to, we'll give, there'll be lots of great publicity. PR for you out of that. But it's a chance to demonstrate that the equipment that you've developed can power this. So that was a big win for them, so they were happy to supply us with the equipment. I persuaded a Scottish company to supply us with a second-hand electrolyzer that they had, which allowed us to produce the hydrogen that we used for these demonstrations. And I persuaded Scottish Government, who just launched their hydrogen strategy, that I wrote to the then Energy Minister, Paul Wheelhouse, and said, it's a great strategy, Minister. How about we demonstrate, some practical example of that strategy by getting a Scottish company to power Edinburgh International Festival events with Scottish hydrogen, and you could use that as a case study, and to my eternal gratitude, they agreed to give us a grant. So, but that was because they then they could then point to, and here's a practical example of what we're talking about in trying to develop this hydrogen economy in Scotland. So there's a bit of beg, borrow, and steal. If you can do that, if you can persuade people that it's in their interests. I put money into it, and have continued at various points to put money into the business from personal savings. I worked for nothing for quite a while in order to not take money out of the business. Some of my colleagues worked for nothing for a while as well, again, to which I'm eternally grateful. So that sort of sweat equity thing played an important part in PlusZero's development. We have managed to get a small amount of investment in, which was a down payment on what was supposed to be a bigger investment, and we're still waiting for that bigger investment to come. I remain confident that one way or another it will come through, but the investment environment for small businesses, particularly when you're in a sector that is regarded as quite early and quite risky, it's been very difficult to get that equity and investment over the line. So
you've done really well in this amount of time, and from what you've said now, I see the role of partnership and persuading people to come into partnership with you. Can you give me a blueprint, a roadmap on how I can form partnership for any idea that I have? This is for people who are watching. How should you think about it? How should you approach it? Because the way you combine all of these elements together to make something amazing, I want you to lay into it and give us, because I don't want to.
So there's probably two things. Maybe the first just goes back to what I said about if you want somebody or an organisation to do something that's going to help you, you need to work out what's the win for them to do that. So and it's the same with partners. If you want, and partnership has played a critical role in PlusZero. We worked very closely with a lot of partners that have played an important role in helping us get to where we are. But that was always done on the basis of understanding what it was that PlusZero could offer them. So that's the important first thing. If you want to get involved with partners and see how people can help you, you have to be able to first work out what's in it for them. What can my company or my innovation, my idea do to help them as well? The other is, and you do this, and the sooner people you do this, the better. Even before you've got an idea, I think it will always pay back. It's always good to go out of your way to help people. So I personally and PlusZero now, if somebody comes to us, whether it's the hydrogen sector or whatever, and asks if we can help them do something, we will, unless we just can't, we will invariably try and help them out. And that comes and pays you back in spades in the future, if you because if you then think, okay, well actually that company could help us now, you're already in a good place with them, because they previously got some benefit from you that that you've offered them, and gone out of your way to kind of help them when you didn't have to do that. So, and I've just, I guess it's just part of my personality, I've always been very happy to help people and do stuff for them, and enjoy doing that, feeling that I've helped somebody out. But I've observed through my sort of career and business work that if you take that into a business environment, ultimately it is going to help you out a lot. So when you do eventually have an idea, you think, okay, well, these guys that I'd previously spoken to or helped out, they might be able to help me with this. So yeah, do what you can to help people if anybody ever asks you to.
So in forming partnership, the first thing we need to first of all be sure of is, how will this thing benefit the other person? What's in it for them?
Yeah.
Then you also try as much as possible to provide value to other people, just in case some days you may need to call on those favor. Is that what? That's the summary.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, also you have to. You want to be sure that the partner that you think can help you is going to be able to help you. So, you really understanding what they do, what their technology or what their service is. So there's no point in spending a lot of time trying to create a partnership with a company that ultimately isn't going to be a good fit for what you're trying to achieve. So that's just basic due diligence, though, I think.
So what drives you to innovation? How do you think about innovation? Because what you are doing is very, very innovative. You are spotting, I see from our discussion, you sort of know how to spot opportunities, gaps that you can plug in, that you can plug your business into. How can I have that kind of mindset?
So I'm a very curious person. I like to know how things work. So I like to know how companies, how their business works, how they make things, how they do things. I've just always had a fascination, particularly in how humans make things in industry. And my first own business had a product that could be used in a variety of industries, and while the business financially wasn't successful, it got me into a huge range of different companies and organisations and industries, ranging from the Bank of England Printworks to the company that makes glass eyes for the NHS, and a whole host of things in between. Wow. I was just utterly fascinated in all of these organisations about how they did their business. A lot of my career has been based on looking at how you can improve how you do your business, how you're organised. So I come at it with a mindset that is really curious about how stuff works and how you make stuff, and a sort of just a personality that likes to see how things can be improved. So I then bring in my knowledge of what you can do with hydrogen technology to and that helps me identify, okay, well, actually hydrogen technology could help this business in here. Equally, if I don't think it would help, then I'm not going to take it in, because again, I see absolutely no point in trying to sell somebody something that isn't going to benefit their business. So I'm just naturally good at seeing how something that I've got could help a business, because I'll have first taken the time to understand how that business works, what it needs to be successful, and I'm generally quite good at working out if what we've got can help them.
So what I'm hearing you saying is, you first of all identify and understand how that business, particular
I think
business works.
That bit is critical. If you don't have a curiosity and a wish to understand your customer's business, then you're not going to be able to you might be able to sell them something once, but if you're trying to sell them something that ultimately isn't going to improve things or make their business better, then they're not going to buy it a second time. So I would say it's much better to put the time in to understand that customer's business, the people that you're wanting to sell to first, so that you can work out, does what I offer actually offer them something that's going to help them. So yeah, that's a critical one, I would say.
Wow, that's really incredible. That's really incredible. The industry you play in, I've had maybe a business shut down maybe 5 years ago in that industry because, you know, funding, which is quite understandable here in Scotland. How are you taking care of funding for day-to-day operations? How are you doing?
Yeah, so we've got two sources of we did have three sources of funding until my money ran out. So I've exhausted my own resources in the business. So the business now runs on the basis of revenue. So we are revenue generating
Awesome.
and government innovation grant funding. So those are our two sources of revenue. You know, in the UK, I think both the UK government through things like Innovate UK and the Scottish government as well have played quite an important role, certainly in my sector, in providing grant funding that helps companies to develop their ideas, develop their products, get things out there. So I think that's a very important part of the UK innovation sort of scene. And we have been seeking equity investment for over 18 months now. We have an agreement, but the investor themselves is waiting to get their own deal over the line, so which is taking much longer than we had expected. So, but we've got the business to a point now where we have two different sides to the business, if you like. We've got what's called PlusZero Power, which is the company that focuses on the applications that the customers would use, providing the hydrogen technology and the hydrogen to them. And then there's PlusZero Energy, which is the company that's focused on building hydrogen production facilities. So PlusZero Power is now at a point where it can grow through revenue without private investment. Now, it will be slow, and it would be better if we could get some investment in. It would just accelerate things a bit. But we're on a growth path now that we can slowly build the business through revenue. PlusZero Energy is because it's building facilities, requires capital. We managed to bring in a joint venture partner for the project we're building in the Western Isles at the moment to help address the gap that we have in funding because our equity investment hasn't got over the line yet. So again, that's collaboration and partnership with a bigger Scottish renewable company that is themselves moving into the hydrogen sector and could like the project that we're doing in the Western Isles, but also saw that could be a good learning curve for them in advance of building their own facilities. So there was a real kind of synergy between what we were needing, which was funding and engineering resource, and what they were looking for, which was to go through that learning curve and get their team the opportunity to sort of work on somebody else's facility before they started building their own.
Wow.
So we used a joint venture structure there in order to bring that finance and resource in. So we set up a joint venture company to run the new facility when it's up and running.
Wow, you seem to be a master at building partnership. Which may still bring me back for you to maybe when you've gathered your thoughts on, walk me through.
Yeah, so I often used to look at myself and say, well, you don't really have any particular skills, qualifications or whatever. But I came to recognise that one of the skills I've got is getting groups of people to work together, because a lot of the projects that I ran as a consultant, or when I was working in organisations, involved lots of different people, lots of stakeholders, and I appeared to be quite good at that. And it goes back to the points I was saying earlier. I'm inherently curious and interested in what organisations do, what makes them tick, how they work, what are their priorities, what are the wins that they need to get. That's just something I naturally find fascinating. So, and that then allows you to work out, well, if these people are going to partner with us or provide something that we want, what's in it for them? How do I create that environment where they get what they want? And thankfully, that's just something that seems to be an inherent part of my personality. It's my natural way of working, I think.
That's pretty. I really, really love that.
Yeah, and recognizing, and seeing the benefit that brings. So once actually, this is really helpful to trying to get things done, then clearly you continue to work on it and develop it and sort of use it to its full effect. So.
Wow, that's brilliant! Like a genius level of things, because with the fact that I'm still going back in my head how you did the event. This company has already built its technology. They are looking for ways to show the technology, and you combined brought everybody together, and everybody wins,
Yeah, and so we're working with spin out from Strathclyde University at the moment that has got a very interesting new electrolyzer technology. So that's the technology that produces hydrogen. They're still very early stage, but so we've got a memorandum of understanding with them that when they get their will help them with provide our insights into how we think the market is going and what their technology should how it could help the market. And then we've also agreed that we will test their technology when they're at the point where it's ready to be tested in the field. And that's clearly going to help them and hopefully build a successful Scottish business, but it also gives us early access to a technology that could give us a competitive advantage as well. So if it is as efficient and offer the benefits that we think it could do if they can get it to work properly, then by helping them, we can then get to use it quickly, and that then allows our business to reduce its costs or be more successful. So it has that really potentially positive upside, for our growth and success as well.
Hydrogen is a clean energy. Electricity is a clean energy. What are the pros and cons of why did you choose hydrogen when EV?
You just use the electricity directly. Yeah, and it's you've highlighted one of the big debates that's going on, and unfortunately, as always happens in these debates, people tend to just paint things in a black and white, so you've got the electrify everything brigade, don't just use the electricity directly. Why on earth would you use electricity to produce hydrogen when you waste, in inverted commas, some of that energy in heat when you're producing hydrogen? So so Elon Musk, so the two ways of using hydrogen as a fuel are through either put it into a fuel cell, which converts the hydrogen back into water and electricity. So hydrogen cars are in effect electric cars with fuel cells fitted that provides the electricity for the batteries and the motor. So Elon Musk calls fuel cells full cells, because he said, well, you waste 50% of the energy producing the hydrogen as heat, and then when you convert it back to electricity, you waste another 40% of it. So the sort of the end-to-end efficiency is really poor compared to putting the electricity straight into the car's batteries. And to an extent, he is right, but that ignores a whole range of factors. So for instance, in Scotland, we have a huge amount of renewable energy from the wind, but there is frequently a big gap between when the wind is blowing and all that power is being produced and when there is a demand for electricity. So there is a significant proportion of the renewable power generated in Scotland, and with any renewable development, is wasted because there isn't a demand for the electricity. And you can't store it in batteries because you're talking about terawatt hours of kind of energy storage, and there's just not enough batteries in the world to store that much, and it would be very expensive. So at the moment, the wind farm companies are paid by as electricity consumers to switch the turbines off. So all of that wasted energy could be used to produce hydrogen, so that the renewable companies are getting paid for their electricity as they are when they have to switch it off, but that electricity is then being used to produce hydrogen. So and then also when you put electricity into an electrolyzer, it produces three things. It produces hydrogen, it produces oxygen, and it produces heat. So if you've got a use for and a value from the oxygen and from the heat, then it's not wasted. You're actually producing a valuable product. So our first hydrogen production plant in the Western Isles in Lewis, the oxygen will be getting supplied to the fish farming industry because they use a lot of compressed oxygen in various stages of the fish farming process. So we will be generating revenue from what in Elon Musk's view is a waste product, but it's only a waste product if you waste it. If you've got customers for it and they'll pay for it, then it's not a waste product. So it's horses for courses, really. So I've got an EV and I think it's great, and I think if you I'm not convinced that hydrogen for cars is the right technology, because the battery EV technology works really well. For large trucks, hydrogen might be a good option, because getting enough energy stored in batteries for big trucks takes quite a lot of the payload away from the truck, whereas you can get more energy stored in hydrogen form on the truck than you can in battery form. So unless there's a big breakthrough in battery technology over the next few years, then it may be that hydrogen for trucks and heavy off-road vehicles and things could be the most cost-effective sort of way of decarbonising them. But yeah, it's very much the application and location sort of specific. So yeah, we tend to look for hydrogen production locations where we can use the heat and we can use the oxygen so that nothing is wasted.
So who is David outside of hydrogen?
Unfortunately, and anybody that's listening to here who's setting up their own business or has been running it for a while will probably recognise that you get, if you're passionate about what you're doing, it tends to absorb you. So there hasn't been as much time out with PlusZero over the last few years for David Amos to do some of the other things that he quite likes doing. So one of the things I do try and make time with is so my wife's family are all from Harris in the Western Isles, native Gaelic speaking crofting sort of background. So my wife inherited her father's croft, which is a sort of small holding in Harris. So we have 36 acres and an old house on Harris, which we are slowly but surely trying to bring back to life. So heading up there at the weekend. It helps that our hydrogen production facility is in Lewis, which is connected to Harris, so I can combine work with a bit of trying to bring a old croft back to life. So I used to play music quite a bit. I played the trumpet. And,
Really?
And was reminded how much I enjoyed that when we had a 40-year reunion of the band that I used to play in the summer. Where we got back together from all over the world and played a gig.
Really?
That reminded. I played trumpet, so I was. So it just reminded me how much I enjoyed playing music and being on the stage with friends. So I've been making a bit of an effort to try and keep practicing my trumpet. But yeah, it's if you're running a business that you're passionate about, and it does tend to be a bit all-consuming. So probably good advice is to tell people to try and get the balance right.
Wow, I could not. Well, I didn't know you play any instrument.
Not very well, but
wow. So I'm looking at, for this is going to get seen by business owner, people who are starting, who are growing, people who are at the stage that they are exiting. What will David of today tell the David that wanted to start PlusZero?
He would probably tell him to not let it take over his life quite so much, and just to try and get the balance a bit better. Thankfully, I've got a wife who you could say is long-suffering, so she knows what I'm like, and therefore was willing to put up with it. But particularly if you're younger and starting off, it might be worthwhile just remembering that there are others in your life, whether partners or children or whatever, that don't forget them, and just try and get that balance right. So yeah, it has been a bit all-consuming, and I would say I'm making a bit of an effort to try and get that balance better at the moment. But ultimately, your plans for when you start your business, unless you're incredibly lucky, aren't going to be how it works out. So you just have to be willing to. As people say, just keep your focus, just go down that rigid line, don't veer left to right, just focus on doing it. I'm not convinced. I think yes, if there's definitely a market there for what that is, but ultimately things will come along that will require you to change your thinking a bit, I think. So certainly we've had to be very flexible in PlusZero in terms of to allow us to navigate what is a very difficult sector at the moment, and make sure that we're still here and still got money to pay salaries now and get the business growing. So the business doesn't look what I was expecting it to when I first started. When I first started in the business, my real interest was on building hydrogen equipment, hydrogen generators. That was because I like making stuff. But I very quickly realised that probably wasn't the right place to start. We needed to kind of create a complete package, a complete solution for customers, and using other people's equipment was the quickest and easiest way to do that. So we might get back eventually to making something, because I quite like the idea of making something, but at the moment it's much more about bringing together other people's solutions into that complete package that can meet the customer's needs. I mean, we will be making hydrogen, so that when the facility opens next year, we will be producing hydrogen and oxygen and heat. So I suppose I'm meeting my my desire to make stuff.
That's pretty cool. What's the future of this business?
So if we take PlusZero Power, so that's the business that provides the hydrogen equipment and hydrogen and that complete package solution to customers. So that is on a trajectory to grow through just revenues, sales. So, and it's probably going to grow through the construction sector. So at the moment, our view is that the construction sector seems to be the sector that's decided that hydrogen technology is going to be one of the ways in which they meet their own carbon decarbonisation goals. And let's say companies like Balfour Beatty, who we work closely with, and others have put a lot of investment and resources into working out how they as a business can use hydrogen. So and that's a big sector in the UK. So and is now starting to bring opportunities for companies like us to bid into larger contracts. So I think PlusZero Power will grow organically. Potentially it could get to being a large, 10, 20, 30, 50 million pound turnover company by the end of the year. If only by the end of the decade. Wishful thinking on my part. And that just grow with the market as more and more companies. There will be there's investment going into hydrogen production plants around the UK, subsidised by UK government. So a bit like the renewables industry, the wind industry. In order to get that going, the government made subsidies available. They're doing the same for hydrogen production. So the cost of hydrogen will come down in 1-2 years' time, so to a level that is equivalent to diesel prices. So, wow. And at that point, there is no financial barrier to adopting hydrogen. At the moment, it's expensive, so if you want to use hydrogen, then it will cost you more, and therefore you've got to be pretty committed to your decarbonisation goals as an organisation, because it is going to cost you. That will change once the subsidised hydrogen production plants come on stream, and at that point we see very rapid growth, and we're putting a lot of effort into positioning ourselves so that at the point where the cost of hydrogen is no longer a barrier, that we're able to sort of grow and expand quite quickly. PlusZero Energy, the hydrogen production, our first plant opens next year.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. Well, if you want to come up, then we would happily let you come and broadcast from our facility. And so on the back of that, we hope to be able to raise funding to build the next plant. So our first plant is quite small, and slowly but surely we will work our way up towards larger scale plants. But that will require us being able to raise the capital to do that.
So let's talk about raising capital, branding, sales. So from founders that I have been talking to, most of them have been coming to one conclusion, that it is very, very easy to get customers, get funding when they've built a moat, sort of a personal brand, and it is mostly founder-led. Founder-led means, just the same way you are here now, the founder is posting on TikTok, on social media pages, then people now have sort of a pseudo relationship with that founder. But the reason why I use the word pseudo is because they've read what he's posting, they feel like they know this person.
So I guess we haven't been very good, I think, on the social media side. I didn't grow up with social media, so I don't naturally take to it. But we did at an early stage make quite an effort to create a visual brand for PlusZero, and I don't take any credit for that myself. Once we had got going, I got a call out the blue on my mobile phone from somebody that I'd never met before, saying, I really like what you guys are doing. I think I could help you. Could we meet and have a chat? So being curious, I met with Mark, and he was a I guess a designer. He'd been a journalist and run the sort of design sort of studio stuff, and he said, I think what you're doing is great. I just think your brand could be so much better. And so I brought Mark on board, Brandon our story. So he came on board as our director of story, and he reworked the PlusZero visual branding and the colouring, and I think created a very attractive look to PlusZero, and I'm very grateful for his input for that. So and it projected, I think, a sort of professional look to what we were doing. We haven't, as I say, made enough of what we're doing out there. One of my colleagues has for some time been saying, we could be doing so much more, telling so much more of our stories out in social media. So it is part of what we will try and do more of, because we are doing some really some really interesting stuff. We were in two groups of engineering students to the Monaco Energy Boat Challenge in Monaco this year, and that was an area where there was quite a lot of stuff out there in social media because the students are really good at it. And it sort of highlighted to me, we need to get better at this stuff, because we're doing some really interesting stuff that people will like. But what we do at the moment is very much business to business. So and I personally think that it's important that you build that relationship on a one-to-one basis, so you actually meet with the people, because ultimately they need to trust you. They need to think that you can have a brand, and if that brand is associated with doing a good job, doing it professionally, doing it safely, that's great. But at the stage we're at, we've had to directly persuade people that that's what we do, and being able to build that relationship with your customers, and you also need that personal relationship to get to know your customers. Your customer can get to know you from their brand, and you might be able to get to know a bit about what they're at from their brand, but in order for us to work out how can we really support this customer, we need to be talking to them. So I don't think there's any branding, yes, I think is important. I think it doesn't replace, in our business anyway, it certainly doesn't replace with that relationship with your personal person-to-person relationship with your customer. So
that's pretty neat. That's and still going back to that a little bit more. One thing I have seen is that I think I've already said that the fact that somebody can have a relationship with be tracking your movement, tracking the growth of the business, like all of the amazing things you are working on. I just love the way the internet now does open up those kind of avenues and opportunities. And I want to know, are there plans in the future for you to exploit these other avenues?
No, absolutely, Coyote. As I was saying, we recognise that we could be doing so much more, and in terms of the mission I have for PlusZero, which is to kind of make a difference on climate change side, getting that message out there, that the type of technology that we provide and others, there are solutions there to the problems of replacing fossil fuels. So we need to get better at that. And one of the things that we intend to do, and if and when we have the resources to do it, and it was a role that's in our business plan, was to bring somebody on board and into the business that can bring those skills, because we don't have those skills within the team. We're all unfortunately a kind of old white sort of balding men at the moment that the technology doesn't come naturally to us, so we do need to get a lot better at that, and bring some more people with those skills and into the business. But I think the sort of PlusZero black and the PlusZero logo and the symbol that we use on everything, we'll have it on our buildings. So we have a visual aesthetic that
Awesome.
that I feel is very important. So we've got the sort of some of the basics there
Covered, which is nice.
And to say, Mark, my former director of story, he kind of very much got that in place for us. So that's there, and I think with the right skills and focus on it, yeah, absolutely, we could do so much more on the sort of social media channels.
Awesome. So if your would-be customer if they are listening to you, let's say construction company, what will you tell them now? Why should they, switch to hydrogen?
So if they're committed in their business to decarbonising, then there's a range of ways in which hydrogen technology can support that journey. Recognition that at the moment that's not going to save them money, but that it has the potential to save them money in the future, in the next few years, when hydrogen price comes down, and also it's actually going to allow them to get business in areas currently that they might struggle. So for instance, in city centre areas, and more cities are introducing clean air zones, quite rightly, because of the pollution from diesel cars and buses and equipment. So you're not able to use diesel generators now in some city centre areas. So if you're going to be building something, a construction company or developer, then you're going to have to find alternatives to diesel generators. So, and that might make the difference between whether you get the contract from the client or not. If the client can see that you're taking seriously trying to find solutions to that, and quite a bit of this is client driven as well. So ultimately, the end users of these, the customers of these construction companies, they are saying, we want to see the carbon associated with this development reduced as much as possible. So we are able to sort of help those companies provide evidence to their clients that, yes, when it comes to running the construction site, then we are looking to adopt the technologies that will allow us to reduce the carbon associated with generators or construction equipment and the like. So.
Awesome. That's incredible. If somebody is listening to us now, I want you to make a case for hydrogen, please.
Well, hydrogen is really interesting because it has multiple uses. So going back to where we started, it was the work I did in the Western Isles of Scotland that got me interested in hydrogen. And in the Western Isles, despite the fact that there are wind turbines on the island, the local communities pay the highest electricity costs in the UK, or amongst the highest. Remote rural communities, island communities, pay the highest electricity bills. So you can look out your window and see a wind turbine and think, well, how come we're producing the energy on our island, and yet I'm having to pay more than most for my electricity. So one of the things that hydrogen does is it allows the production of energy that can, in an area that can then be used in an area. So the Western Isles is interesting as well because over half of Scotland's community-owned land is in the Western Isles. So the land is owned by communities, and some of them, before the local grid became saturated, some of those local communities put up wind turbines, raised the money, put them up, and they've been generating a very good income for the community from those turbines. Now the grid is saturated, and there's no opportunity for them to put turbines up to bring that revenue into their community. But what hydrogen does is we can offer them an offtake for their wind energy, which allows them to generate that revenue that they then invest in the local community. So there's a trust called Point and Sandwick Trust. They've got 9 megawatt of wind turbines, and they built them themselves, and all of the revenue they've generated has been put into the local community. They support the local hospice, they fund scholarships for young people from the islands. They, together with the one of the tree trusts, charities, they fund people replanting trees in the island. So a whole lot of great things that they do with that money, because they are generating the income from the turbines. So hydrogen in the islands allows more of that to happen, because we can create the demand for their electricity, and they can sell that to a community-based company. That means that they will keep more of the revenue than putting it into the grid. We can then produce hydrogen, which can replace the diesel or petrol on the island. So small rural communities can't make their own petrol or oil refinery plant, but they can produce hydrogen. It's not a complicated process. So it creates that ability to become energy self-sufficient, and islands, remote areas, have the potential to go from places where they have the most expensive energy to places where they actually own the production of energy and can provide it to the local communities for at an affordable price. So that energy independence, I think, is one of the big benefits of hydrogen. We're moving to a model from very centralised energy production, big power stations, and energy goes out to the periphery, to one where the energy is produced in the periphery in smaller places and then used in that area. And that also creates the opportunity in places like the Western Isles, where the communities own the land, for them to take more direct ownership of that energy production as well. So hydrogen is exciting from that perspective, because it creates a real opportunity for people to take ownership of energy and potentially make their communities much more resilient and robust going forward. But on a larger scale, it will create significant jobs and investment in these areas. Orkney and Shetland benefited very significantly from the North Sea oil and gas. The Western Isles didn't, because of its location, but it lost a lot of people who moved from the islands to go and work in the oil and gas industry. And oil and gas is now in decline in the North Sea, so hydrogen production creates that opportunity for new clean jobs located in these remote rural areas, provide, because the island populations and remote rural populations are generally falling, which makes it harder to maintain public services and schools and all the things that you need in a community. So the production of hydrogen at scale also has that potential to provide a really clean new industry that will create the jobs and that will help revitalise and maintain these rural areas. So that whole social community benefit, I think, is huge. In Scotland, because of the sheer amount of wind that we've got, and potentially wave and tidal power, could be a powerhouse in hydrogen production. And the Scottish Government understand that as well and are focused on trying to make that happen. The other case for hydrogen is it's very versatile. I mean, we've been talking about using hydrogen as a direct replacement for diesel and petrol, so using the hydrogen itself as a fuel. but hydrogen is also a precursor to making a whole range of things. So we already use millions and millions of tons of hydrogen around the world for all sorts of industries and processes. It's just all produced from natural gas at the moment, but you could produce that from clean hydrogen, but you can also you can make synthetic fuels, what are called e-fuels. Hydrogen is one of the precursors to that. So you could start producing clean, fossil-free fuels with hydrogen and other inputs. So it's a feedstock to a whole other range of chemical industrial processes. So it's a very versatile product. And as I said before, also you don't just produce hydrogen from electrolysis, you produce heat and oxygen. So they both have uses in various industries and processes. So I think viewing hydrogen through that sort of that wider lens, I think is quite important, and try and move away from this black and white sort of view that electricity good, hydrogen bad, or hydrogen good. That there is a bit of polarization in there. Yeah, hydrogen doesn't make sense for some things, but in many areas it does. And
so what I wanted to ask you, if I write you a check of £200 million.
Yes, please.
What change will you like to see in the world
with that £200 million?
Yeah.
So if I just stick to the sector that we're in, that £200 million would allow, if we invested it into the type of clean energy projects that we're involved in, that would allow us to really push forward some quite amazing renewable and hydrogen production facilities in the islands that we're working with, Western Isles, Orkney, Shetland, and make a huge step forward to decarbonising the islands' own kind of economies, and really demonstrate islands are like mini countries in their own right, particularly the things like the Western Isles, Orkney, Shetland, because they are groups of islands with each of them has got a main town, if you like, is the London, and then lots of small places distributed, and they have the same interesting tensions between people from one island and the other and stuff. So they're like mini countries, and if that 200 million probably not even wouldn't need as much as that, but that could demonstrate how you could decarbonise a country with renewable technologies, hydrogen in there, battery electric in there, so and do it across a whole island community, and create that model for doing that elsewhere at a larger scale. So yeah, we would make good use of that 200 million, definitely.
Impressive. Is there anything you would like to talk about that we've not mentioned, that you think can change people's opinion about hydrogen, about what you do, about probably bring you customers that I've not asked you?
So I mean, I go back to this sort of black and white problem that we see, that people seem to like to create sort of either or arguments, and and it includes serious big energy companies that for whatever reason decide that it's in their interest to do down hydrogen because they are not involved in that, or some it can be the other way. There are the hydrogen zealots that sort of say no, hydrogen is the way forward. So nothing is ever black and white, and hopefully you've seen that there are some areas that I've highlighted where hydrogen is a good solution, but there are plenty of other areas where hydrogen isn't the answer. So battery technology is a great solution for equipment, machinery that you that the batteries can store enough energy to deliver what that machine needs to do. So cars, I think, battery electric is probably the right technology. And if there's further breakthroughs in battery electric technology so that you can store more energy, less weight, less cost, then battery technology could be the way forward for quite a lot of the requirements in vehicles and temporary energy storage. So we are, if you like, technology agnostic, in that we think right now hydrogen is the right technology for some of the things that we are doing, but we would be the first to stop using it, say for generators, if there was a different technology that could do it better, because as I say, from our purpose is to help our customers decarbonise what they're doing, and we offer them what we think is the right technology to do that. And right now hydrogen is the technology that can do that for power and larger machinery and the like, but that may change. So I would just make a plea for let's stop viewing everything through a black and white lens and just accept that hydrogen's not perfect. For some stuff it works well, for others it doesn't, and that may well change in the next sort of coming years, because technology is continually advancing. It's one of the reasons I'm quite excited, or very excited, because we have really great connections out there with companies, Scottish companies and others that are doing some really amazing things in new ideas, and whether that's for hydrogen production, like Clyde Hydrogen coming out of Strathclyde Uni, or other things. I mean, there are going to be better solutions coming out in the years to come. Just keep an open mind and try and avoid going into black and white battles.
Thank you so much. I love where we are ending this, but you did mention something earlier where you said you are thinking of a role in the business that can help you tell the kind of stories of, you are doing much, you need to talk much. Because I see most founders, which, this is something any human being is liable to fall into, which is that you just focus on doing the work, and some even go as far as say, since they can't do the work, say, let my good work speak for me. Where you see somebody who is doing nothing, it's making a lot of noise and getting all of the attention. I sincerely believe if somebody is doing a lot, you should also, one should put more effort into it. So I'm saying that, Sarah, so that you can talk to me about the kind of talent you are looking for in that area.
Yeah, so you're completely right. We need to get better at telling our story and what we're doing, and because ultimately people engage with people and things based on stories. So so I guess that was one of the things that our previous director of story was quite good at, in terms of drawing out that short, concise sort of narrative about what we're doing. So we certainly need the skills around just being able to create the narrative, in an engaging way. So be able to write that down or talk that out. So there's that part, but we also need somebody with the technical skills that understands the platforms, knows which ones are good for what, and how you can get your message tailored, whether it's video or pictures or words or whatever. My sense is there's platforms are used for different things, and there's different audiences use different platforms, so understands how those platforms works and can help us work through how would we get our message out there on the right platform, which platform would be right for which message, and also has the technical ability to do that. So there's probably a mix of skills. Whether one person has got all of those, it would be great if they did. They may be very good in the understanding of the platforms and the technical side, but they could also maybe be very good at just teasing out the message from myself and the rest of the team, because and then just translating that.
So the world, broadcast it to the world.
Yeah. So if there is anybody out there that's got those skills and is interested in what we're doing, then definitely get them to give me a shout.
All right. Thank you so much, David. We've come to the end of this show.
Okay.